Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the AIA 2017 Documents Release webinar on the Owner-Architect Agreements and Sustainable Projects exhibit, brought to you by AIA Contract Documents. My name is Hasti Hijazi. I'm Director of Global Innovation Education at AIA Contract Documents, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Just a few administrative items before we get started. We are going to be recording this webinar, and you will be receiving the recording along with the PowerPoint at the conclusion of today's program. You can also see the PowerPoint as a handout in your GoToWebinar window on the right-hand side. We will go through the 90-minute curriculum, and we will answer questions at the end of the program. Throughout the program, please feel free to enter any of your questions in the chat or question window on your right-hand side, as all attendees are muted. This presentation is protected by U.S. copyright laws, and this program is eligible for 1.5 AIA HSW learning units. When you registered for the program, you entered your AIA member number if applicable. I will be reporting your credit directly to the AIA in the next 14 business days. So give me 2 weeks to report your credit, and that will be reported and appear on your online transcript. I'm now going to turn it over to our presenters to briefly introduce themselves before beginning the program. I'd like to turn it over now to Andy Mendelson. Andy?
Thank you, Hasti. My name is Andy Mendelson, and I'm presenting from Chicago. I am the Senior Vice President and Chief Risk Management Officer of Berkeley Design Professional Underwriters. We are a professional liability insurance carrier serving the architecture and engineering industry across the United States. I joined Berkeley DP in 2013 after a 36-year career in practice, mostly in the large firm A&E environment, where I had a variety of positions from design, project management, market leadership, contract management, and as a CFO. My last 4 years I served as Director of Practice Management for Canon Design. I've been a member of AIA Documents Committee since 2003. Was a primary author of the 2007 Owner-Architect Agreements and have been focused on Owner-Architect Agreements and various types of construction delivery methods throughout my service to AIA. Mike?
I am Michael Bamba. I am one of the attorneys on staff at the AIA who works with the Contract Documents Committee. I've been with the AIA for over 10 years now, and I guess as is relevant to this program, I worked on the 2007 Owner-Architect Agreements, and I was the attorney on staff who was assigned to work with the task group that did the updated 2017 Owner-Architect Agreements as well. Prior to coming to the AIA, I worked in private practice at a firm in Washington, D.C. that represented design professionals in litigation and corporate matters. Lane?
Thanks, Mike. My name is Lane Bucher. I'm an architect in the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, currently serving as the Energy Program Manager. I also manage our Contract Documents program for the Commission, and the Commission does projects for state agencies and institutions of higher education in the state of Ohio. I was president of the Columbus chapter of AIA, served on the AIA's Public Architects Committee's advisory group, and joined the Documents Committee in 2014 and started working immediately on the Owner-Architect Agreements. So back to you, Andy.
I think this is Mike gets to take over from here.
Oh, Mike, back to you, Mike. Sorry.
Nope. No problem, Lane. We'll go over, quickly go over the course learning objectives and agenda. We have a 90-minute program, but we have a lot of information to go over, so I won't spend too much time on these introductory portions. But in terms of course learning objectives, we're going to take a look at and evaluate the overall impact of the changes in the 2017 Owner-Architect Agreements. and we'll be discussing in the lead up to that the various different types of owner-architect agreements we have. We don't just have a one-size-fits-all approach to our agreements. We'll take some time to examine the changes, the specific changes in the owner-architect agreements with respect to the overall format, including a new distinction in our additional services section. And then at the end of the program, or towards the end of the program, we'll be taking a look at the new sustainable project exhibit that is going to be incorporated into the owner-architect agreement if there is a significant sustainable objective on the project. Our agenda for today, first we'll go over an overview of the contract documents program. We like to give everyone a little bit of a background on how our documents are developed. Then we're going to cover the process for selecting the owner-architect agreement that best fits your needs. This is where we'll be going into the various different types of owner-architect agreements that we have. But the main focus of the program is going to be the new owner-architect agreements and what's new for the 2017 versions of the B101. Most of the changes in the B101 will be relevant to the other documents, so we'll just spend most of our time on that document, and we'll be focusing on various business item terms as well as practice-related items that were changed in 2017. And that will also incorporate a brief discussion on the B103, the C401, which is the consultant agreement, and that's where we'll also have the sustainability exhibit. And we'll also briefly discuss the insurance exhibit, which is something that's been added to the owner-contractor agreements. But given the architect's role in the bidding and negotiation process, it's something that architects should be aware of as well. So first we're going to go over, do an overview of the AIA contract documents program. Once again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we do like to give some our attendees a little bit of perspective on our program. The AIA has been writing standard form documents since 1888. That's 129 years. And it's evolved really to reflect practices in the construction industry. The program started off with a single document, a uniform contract. I believe it was something like 3 pages long. As the construction industry has evolved, so has our documents program, to the point where now we have very few documents that are only 3 pages long. Most of those are probably forms. So the length of our documents has evolved with the complexity of the industry, as well as the number of documents. We're up to, I believe, in excess of 200 agreements and forms. What are our objectives when we're writing our documents? The primary objective is to be as fair and balanced as possible. On any construction project, you have competing interests at play, and we do our best to balance those interests as best we can. And our overriding principle in terms of dealing with risk is to place it with the party that is best able to manage that risk. Our drafting process is not quick. The 2017 documents, we began the process over 3 years before they were published, beginning with initial efforts for the A201 general conditions and the B101 owner-architect agreement. A lot of the developments in our documents will begin in those 2 documents, and then they will sort of migrate into all of our other ones. So we usually start there. And the first thing that we do, and I guess it's not really a linear process, but this is sort of a culmination of all of the things that we do in updating our documents. But throughout the 10 years that the 2007 documents have been in existence, we've monitored legal decisions and developments in the industry. And so our first step is to begin incorporating any relevant legal decisions that we believe need to be addressed in our updated documents. As part of our initial process, we also seek industry comments from the various participants who will be using our documents, whether it's owners, contractors, architects, consultants, subcontractors, because we want to get their feedback as well on parts of our documents that are working versus not working. And then that sort of leads into the drafting and revising process. This is not a one-shot deal where we just solicit comments, make a few changes, and then all of a sudden publish the documents. We have a as I said, it's a long process where we will develop usually at least 2 full drafts that we send out to our groups of liaisons for comment. And we will receive those comments. We will review every single comment and indicate what action is taken, if any, related to that comment. So it can be a long process, but it's a thorough process where we have multiple drafts that are issued for review and comment by the industry, and we review every single one of those comments that come in. And we spend significant time as necessary on any comments that do come in. And then the final process is getting approval from the full documents committee, finalizing the documents and publishing them. And so beginning in that process all in all took over 3 years to complete the full 2017 release that just occurred a couple months ago. In terms of participants, we do market research leading up to our preparations and drafting it, but our real focus is on industry stakeholders. They're the ones whose input we really want to get. That includes AIA members and resources within the AIA, such as our knowledge communities. But we also reach outside of the AIA to various liaisons and subject matter experts. For instance, the American Bar Association has a number of subgroups within its existence that consist of attorneys who focus on different parts of the construction industry. So, for example, there's a group that represents owners primarily. So we certainly had a number of interactions with that group to get the owner's perspective a little bit on our documents. And similarly, we reached out to contractor groups and individual contractors as well to kind of get their feedback on all of our documents. And certainly we have no shortage of architects' voices when we are drafting our owner-architect agreements. And then we have the AIA Contract Documents Committee, which in and of itself is a diverse group of individuals that provide input on our documents. Speaking of the committee, it has been in existence since 1887. It's been in continuous existence except for short periods of time during the Great Depression and World War II, but I'm sure no one is surprised that the group may not have met during those periods of time. But as I said, it's been around since 1887 when it was referred to as the Committee on the Uniform Contract, which was the AIA's first standard form agreement. It was that short three-page agreement. From there, the AIA, I guess, determined that actually a full set of standard documents was necessary, and that led to the 1911 publishing of the AIA's first set of agreements. And that's the first time an owner-architect agreement was published by the AIA. And Grosvenor Atterbury was the individual who chaired the committee during that period of time. Today's committee is 30 to 35 volunteer AIA members, and we have outside legal counsel as well and industry advisors. And we try to achieve as much diversity within the group as we can, whether it's geographical or what their background is. While everyone on the AIA is required to be an AIA member, everyone in the committee, rather, is required to be an AIA member. They don't all work for architecture firms. We have a number of different backgrounds. And for example, Lane, who's presenting on this program, works essentially as an owner or for an owner, and is able to provide that owner's perspective when we're drafting our documents. And Andy, who when he joined the committee, was with an architecture firm, but has since transitioned into the insurance world, is able to provide not only his background from practicing architecture, but also his new involvement with the insurance industry. So we try to get as much diversity and perspective as we can on our documents committee. And I would like to point out too that the documents committee members sign up for a 10-year commitment to serve on the documents committee, which I'm sure strikes everyone as a long period of time. And the reason for the 10-year commitment is because we generally have a 10-year cycle for our documents. And we need that institutional knowledge from one cycle to the next. And so we ask the committee members to stick around for 10 years. And in some instances, we make them stick around longer. But again, it's really just to be consistent with our 10-year revision cycle and to keep that institutional knowledge. It's a hardworking group. They care a lot about what they do. And we, the AIA, is indebted to them for all their hard work that they put forth into the program. Here's just a snapshot. If you're interested in finding out more about the current documents committee, we do have a link on the website where you can get full bios on all of the committee members. So we just like to point that out in case anyone is interested in finding out more. Trends in the program in terms of what's changed since this program started. Certainly more and more delivery models to choose from. While the predominant delivery method is probably still design, bid, build, obviously design, build has taken off and has a growing share of projects. So does, and you have construction manager as constructor and construction manager as advisor. And the construction industry is constantly changing. You've got a movement towards digital practice in the use of building information modeling. Sustainability continues to grow. And you have more and more participants on a construction project that didn't necessarily exist even 50 years ago. So those are the types of developments that our contract documents need to address, and which is why they're revised on a 10-year cycle. A shorter cycle than that, it's really hard to have our documents or have the documents get into the industry, have time to be used on projects, have time to be tested in court opinions, but a 10-year cycle is sufficient time for those things to happen, but frequently enough that we can address changes in the industry to see what sticks in the industry in terms of changes. We don't want to react to every little change as it comes up, but if something is a trend that seems to be continuing, it's worthwhile to address. And so that's what's happening with the emergence of building information modeling and sustainability. We've also found that as the industry becomes more complex and our documents become more complex, we need to publish guides and other instructional matters that supplement just the contract language to give the users a better understanding of what the documents are intended for and how they should be used. So with that brief overview, I'm going to turn it over to Andy, and he is going to go over our owner-architect agreements in general.
Thanks, Mike. As Mike mentioned, there's been a number of delivery methods, construction project delivery methods that have come into the industry over the last 20 years. And it's important that you select the correct owner, architect, and construction agreement family to match the project type, the client type, the project delivery method, or the scope and complexity. We have a good number of families of documents that we created on Documents Committee that are coordinated across design and construction and with consultants. And so each of these factors is important. If is the project small, something like a house addition, or is it complex, like a biosciences lab? Are you, as the architect, providing services for all the traditional phases, or are they limited services? Is your project team a standard one where you, as the architect, are hiring mechanical, electrical, structural engineers? And are you responsible for the cost estimating on the project, or is it a more complex team that might have a general contractor on board for pre-construction services that may enable you to rely on their skills in estimating and scheduling? And what about the client type itself? Are they sophisticated? Do they have in-house expertise? Are they frequent builders of projects, such as a university or a healthcare system? Or is this going to be a one-off project, as we typically have for a homeowner? So what we do is we create families of documents appropriate for the project type and the delivery method and the client type. And they're meant to be modified to fit the specifics of each project. As we consider the scope and complexity, on our next slide, we see that we have more robust contracts at the top of the chart and less complex towards the bottom of this diagram. So the B101, our core document that we're going to spend most of the time on, is a lengthy document. And it's got lots of terms and conditions in it. It's about 20 pages. And it really covers most of the conditions you would face in a design, bid, build type project delivery and offers pretty significant contract protection. The B104 is an abbreviated form document, and the B105 is a short form document. And on the right side of this diagram are the owner-contractor agreements that match up with those. So typically the B series documents are the owner-architect agreements, the A documents are the owner-contractor agreements, and then the C documents are consultant agreements. If we look at what we've done in the A201 family then in 2017, we've really focused on these 5 documents. And all these titles, most of the titles of our documents start with the word standard form of agreement between owner and architect, and that is indeed the title of the B101. The B102 is a 2-part agreement where B102 is actually the front end containing terms and conditions but without a predefined scope of services. We have a series of B200 documents that are available that talk about specific types of delivery, types of projects such as historic preservation, such as commissioning, certain types of specialty services. So you can put together a 2-part document using the B102. The B103 is based on the B101, but is a standard form of agreement between owner and architect for a more complex project. That's the circumstance I just mentioned where there's an additional party hired by the owner to provide cost estimating and scheduling services, quite often a general contractor pre-selected and made part of the pre-construction team. And then the abbreviated form, B104, we get that down to about 9 pages, and we streamline the phases to consolidate some of the design disciplines. And then the B105 is a short form, really just a 2-page agreement meant for you to have a minimal amount of terms and conditions and for you to insert or attach the scope of services and intent of the project. The B105 is the closest thing we have to a letter agreement, and is provide to be very useful for more limited scope projects or very small projects. We also have related documents that are in the A201 family, but will be updated in a few years. These documents were more recently updated in 2009 and 2010, but they're specific for the project type or for the client type, the criteria we were looking at earlier. So B106 was created in 2009, or 2010 rather, as a result of the amount of architects that were encouraged in participating in some of the reconstruction around Hurricane Katrina and other natural disasters that occurred. It's an excellent document. It's offered for free on AIA's public website. The B107 is for prototypical single-family residential projects where your client is the architect, would likely be a developer builder. And then we have some housing projects, B109 for multifamily residential and mixed use. We have a condominium supplement for that. And then we have B108, which are for federally funded or federally insured projects. So all of these documents are very similar to the B101 and the B103. It's just that there's certain customization that is done. So probably the 2019-2020 period is when these will next be updated, and as Mike mentioned, they will follow the updates that we provided in B101 and B103. One of the things that AIA offers on our Learn page on under contract documents as part of resources, there are some very convenient contract relationship diagrams. And this really helps you visualize these various document families and the relationship between the parties. And of course, today we're going to be focusing on the conventional design, bid, build, delivery method in the A201 family. So these are the documents that were updated in 2017. You can see the B101, B103, and B104. We did also update the B105, but it doesn't show on this diagram because it's considered part of our small project family of documents. Towards the right side of the gray box, you see the companion owner-contractor agreements, and the commonality here is the A201 general conditions, which discusses the roles and responsibilities of the owner, the contractor, and the architect. And as I mentioned, the C series agreements are consultant agreements, so the architect consultant primary agreement is the C401, and the contractor-subcontractor agreement is the A401. In the upper right-hand corner are the surety relationships with the owner and contractor for performance and payment bonds, the A310 and the A312. Those documents were not yet updated in 2017, but this, in general, is the A201 family of documents. So Mike mentioned some of the trends that have occurred in the documents since he's joined the committee, and I have over the last 10 to 15 years. And it really has to do with the modularity of the way we assemble these documents. So the way an owner-architect agreement package would be put together would be, you would have a base document, whether it's the B101 or the B103 or one of the other B documents. And if you have the use of building information modeling on the project, those services and terms and conditions are contained in the E203 2013 document, which is an exhibit to the owner-architect agreement. Similarly, if you have a sustainable goal, if the owner establishes a sustainable goal for the project, we have consolidated all of the services and terms and conditions for a sustainable project into this new exhibit called the Sustainable Project Exhibit E204. So depending on the character of the project and whether sustainability or BIM are included in the project, you would assemble the document package based on this base contract and these exhibits. Similarly, when we look to our consultants, we have the same exhibits that would apply to our consultants. What our philosophy in creating these exhibits is that they will apply to the architects, to the consultants, and to the contractors. One singular document that describes the roles and responsibilities of each party and therefore can be used consistently across a document family package. So the C401 package looks very similar to the B101 package, depending on if you're using BIM or a sustainable project. And of course, the C401 is a pass-through agreement, which means it refers to the terms and conditions of the owner-architect agreement. So as an architect, you should be sharing those terms and conditions so that you know you're sharing information with the consultant so that they know what they're getting into in terms of their own contractual obligations. Gets a little bit more complex for the contractor package because in addition to the BIM exhibit and the SP exhibit as applicable, there might be supplementary conditions that are provided that might be a separate document or could be an edited A201. So that document in the middle, that A201, which is about a 40-page document, is really, really important. And with the software that AIA has developed, you are able to edit right within that document. So the A201 is a much longer document than the actual owner-contractor agreement. A101 is for stipulated sum. A102 and A103 are for cost-plus agreements, one with a GMP and one without. Those are relatively short agreements, between 7 and 15 pages. Really, the bulk of the terms and conditions are within that A201 document. And that's why we call this family of documents the A201 family. It's really where the responsibilities of an owner, contractor, and architect are described in the greatest detail. So again, by assembling the A documents with the exhibits, you end up with a modular package of for the ultimate construction contract. So what I'd like to do is share with you a couple of examples of these contract relationship diagrams for the most popular delivery methods. The first one we're looking at here is construction manager as advisor. And conceptually, it's similar to A201 as far as the way it lays out, except in this case, the construction manager is an advisor. They are not a builder or a constructor. So their agreement with the owner is a C-series agreement, the C132. Similarly, because they are not a builder, the A201 general conditions have been modified to be the A232 general conditions. And these documents were updated last in 2009. And similarly, it's a bit different between the architect and the owner, and the B103 document was modified to recognize the fact that the construction manager is an advisor, and as a result, they are, has somewhat different terms and conditions. Commonality in this agreement includes the C401, which works for an architect-consultant agreement no matter what the base owner, what the construction delivery method is. So we will next look at the construction manager as constructor. And in this case, the A201 general conditions apply again, because here the construction manager has the same role as a general contractor in terms of their construction relationships. So they can also use the A401 agreements with their subcontractors who they're contracting directly with, and the architect can use the C401 with its consultants. And again, to acknowledge the differences, construction manager and the fact that you are going to act a little bit more cooperatively and collaboratively with the construction manager, the owner-architect agreement would be 133. The design-build family gets a little bit more complex, and risk management tip of the day, as diligent as everybody should be on this webinar about careful contract review, dial that up a little bit if you're in a design-build family of documents. The key issue here is the flow-down risk that might be extended to you as an architect from the design builder that's contained in their agreement between the owner and the design builder. You as an architect are typically contracted to the design builder, and you can see all the documents that we've created here. These documents were updated in 2014. And you can see the list of documents is pretty extensive. In addition, there are exhibits and amendments that help clarify the intent and scope of the project. There's kind of a two-phase process here, and in that second phase, when the construction values and schedules are finalized, amendments are employed to tighten up all that information. So this is an example of a little bit of more complex family of documents. But then again, we also have some more simple forms. Not everything is geared towards large and complex projects, of course. As we've mentioned, we have small project family of documents, including this one, which many architects act as a design builder, and we've created a document based on a design build arrangement you may have with an owner. The contract A145 does have exhibits to it. It does have amendments to it, again, to clarify the scope and the pricing. So it's just been a little bit of an example of the various families of documents that we have. And again, these documents are coordinated across the design side and the construction side to make sure terms and conditions are consistent and responsibilities and roles are clearly understood by the parties. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lane, take us into the next section of the program.
Thank you, Andy. So my role is to discuss what is new with the new owner-architect agreements. And so these are divided into two things, business items and practice items. The B101 is the first document we're going to cover, which is kind of the flagship of the owner-architect agreements. And it has the traditional 5 phases of architect services: schematic design, design development, construction documents. What was bidding and negotiation is now called procurement, and then construction administration. In 1997, additional services were called contingent or optional additional services, and then in 2007, additional services became additional services, whether they were part of the original contract or added later. Now in 2017, we've changed the term again and divided it into supplemental services for those things that are contracted at the time of execution of the agreement, such as civil engineering, landscape architecture, interior design. These are services which are not in the customary package of basic services, but often added to the contract for a project. And then we have additional services, which is what we once called additional services contracted after execution of the agreement, such as changes in design, unforeseen conditions, value engineering changes, evaluation and documentation of substitutions, and other things. Article 4 starts with a table of supplemental services. 4.12 is the description of supplemental services, and then 4.2 covers additional services. So there's a chart here that hopefully helps you understand this, and it's divided into two segments, those that are in the agreement and those that are contracted by amendment. So in 2007, we had additional services in both sides of the equation. We had additional services at the time of agreement and additional services that were added later by amendment. For the consultant contract, C401, we don't have basic services, we just have consultant services. And those services could be part of the architect's basic services or part of their additional or supplemental services. And then anything added later would be additional services on the consultant side. So in 2017, additional services have become supplemental services if they were contracted in the original agreement, and then additional services in both agreements, the B101 and C401, are all those things that are contracted later. Some of the key business items, we had some discussion about percentage fees. The consensus of the members of the task group on the committee were that nobody likes percentage fees because they create problems. Everyone seemed to prefer lump sum fees, but our contracts are universal and have to be available for people who would like to contract that way. So one of the things we were concerned about is what happens when the budget fluctuates between phases. So what we've done is try to introduce a concept that compensation that has been previously paid cannot be clawed back if the estimate goes down in the subsequent phase. So for example, the schematic design fee is X% of $1 million, which is the estimate, and then during DD the estimate changes to $900,000. Well, the DD fee is that percentage of $900,000, but the SD fee that's already been paid would not be adjusted. So you're not clawing back fee if the estimate goes down. When market conditions change because bids came in too high, or the bids came in too high because of market conditions, the architect does not have to revise the documents for free if the architect could not have reasonably anticipated the change. And then review of substitutions during bidding is now an additional service for which the architect is compensated. The cost of the work now includes the reasonable value of labor, materials, and equipment donated to or otherwise furnished by the owner. A lot of times the architect was not getting fees for those items that did not have a an invoice associated with them, so they weren't tracked as part of the cost of the work. Now they are, and you have to come to some agreement on what that value is. And then, except as otherwise expressly provided, the agreement terminates 1 year from the date of substantial completion. So we wanted to cut off the opportunity for the owner to continue to call the architect and ask them to do additional work on an agreement that is for a project that's over a year old. So it has to end sometime. Some other things, milestone dates, the ones included are now design phase milestones, construction commencement, substantial completion, and there's a fill point for other dates that you need to include. Now this is important because the agreement now gives a specific time structure to your services, and you have to perform or get a contract modification to deviate. And this works both ways. If the owner fails to timely perform, you're also entitled to a modification. Included in the initial information, and I should mention that in B101, the initial information in 2007 was included in an exhibit. Now it's integrated into the document, and at 1.1.9 is a list of the owner's consultants and the architect's consultants. The owner's consultants were previously just a blank fill point. Now it prompts the owner to list their geotechnical and civil engineers, which were always required by Article 5, owner's responsibilities, but not listed. This is important because it reinforces that the owner has this responsibility, or else they become supplemental or additional services. So once again, it creates some structure that the owner and architect can use to negotiate the contract. At 2.5, Section 2.5, the insurance that is now required of the architect is now identified in more and better detail. This language had been in the B103 and still is, but it's now been added to the B101 as well. What this does is keeps the insurance requirements from being misstated by the owner. The architect gets a chance to clean up the requirements before the agreement is executed. The document was previously silent on the issue of additional insureds because a lot of owners, including the state of Ohio, often asks for the owner and other parties to be additional insureds. It's included in the agreement. One of the principal reasons is so that language is correct and applied to the insurance products, for which it's available. CGL and auto insurance, you can make the owner an additional insured, but you can't do that on professional liability insurance or workers' comp. So makes clear that distinction. The indemnification by the owner to the architect for use of the instruments of service now includes without the architect's involvement, now includes the cost of defense, but clarifying language is included, separating that act from defending the cost. Clarifying language is included, separating the act of defending from the cost of defense. At 9.6 and 9.7, there's now a termination fill point. This termination fee fill point, this allows for the architect to request that if the owner terminates them for convenience, they would get a termination fee, and that fee can be subject to negotiation at the time of execution of the agreement and not at the time of termination. The licensing fee has also been moved from Article 11 to Article 9 so that it's adjacent to this termination fee fill point. Also, the document previously did not have a savings clause or a severability clause that keeps the rest of the document from being declared invalid if one or more parts are declared invalid by a court. So this, at the bottom of this slide, shows the exhibit, the Article 4 table for supplemental services. This table has gone from 3 columns to 2 columns, and we've taken out, in most cases, the document that lists where the services are delineated. So in the first column, you can see that we identify what those services are, and the second column simply provides whose responsibility it is. Is it the architect's responsibility, the owner's, or is that service simply not provided? And so to fill out this form properly, this table properly, you would need to have something in every row of that column. Even if you had all not provided, that would identify that the architect is not responsible for those services. And then below the table is a description of those services so that you can add additional detail on how those services are to be provided. You can also add an AIA document. One of our 200 series documents, B documents, for a particular item. In 4.13, we identify the sustainable objective so that it will coordinate with E204. And then 1.3, document now recognizes that you may be doing building information modeling on your project. This clause identifies and defines the BIM services being based on E203 unless you modify the document to be using something else, another protocol. There's also a caveat that says use of a model without the protocol is at the user's risk without liability to the other party. So this protects the architect who's providing a BIM model to a party that's not under the protocol agreement. Article 1, as I mentioned earlier, is the former Exhibit A. It's now all integrated into the agreement. Program physical characteristics, the budget for the cost of the work, milestones, delivery method, sustainable objective, owner's rep, and other folks required to review the architect's submittals, owner's consultants, architect's representative, architect's consultants, and other necessary practice items. Believe it or not, the architect is supposed to be licensed in some states, including ours. So we've now included some language that says that in the agreement. And we also have a fill point at the signature line so that the architect can indicate their license number if the owner requires it. Throughout the documents, the terminology of digital modeling has been changed to digital representation. This avoids the confusion between physical and digital models and also from the building information model. Model has many meanings, and representation can also have specific meaning. The term environmentally responsible has been changed to the current industry terminology of sustainable. I mentioned earlier the bidding negotiation phase has been changed to procurement, which covers both of those methods. This is also reflective of industry terminology, and the individual types of activities are still divided between bidding and negotiation. At 5.12, the paragraph was rewritten to reflect the reality that owners and contractors do have reasons to speak without the architect's intervention. As written, the former paragraph prohibited any direct communication. So now the section has three main elements. The architect must be included in communications relating to the architect's services or professional responsibilities. The owner has a duty to promptly notify the architect of any direct conversations or communications that have substance to the project. For example, a discussion over a few beers about locating the porta potties probably does not need to be reported back to the architect. However, a discussion about accepting a masonry mock-up over a couple beers definitely does need to be reported back to the architect and coordinated with them. Communications with the architect's consultants is still through the architect. A couple other items that are in both B101 and B103. At 3.1.5, the owner can accept non-conforming work without the architect's approval, but if it does, it's at the owner's risk. This also applies to the owner's directives or substitutions, which were included in the 2007 language. And then at 3.6.4.3, we talk about delegated design, and the architect is required to review and take appropriate action on the contractor's submittals. And delegated design, as you probably know, is when the architect provides performance criteria or an outline of the requirements, but does not provide definitive design. For example, a steel stud bearing wall project where the studs are panelized and the stud fabricator is responsible for the definitive design. The architect needs to review and take appropriate action on the submittal, but only for the purpose of making sure that it conforms to the design concept and information contained in the contract documents for the project, not to verify the structural aspects of that delegated design. Then we move to B103, and as Andy mentioned, in this case, the owner engages a cost consultant and a scheduling consultant that are separate from the architect. Basic services also include accelerator fast-track design and construction, multiple bid packages, phased construction. The owner's scheduling consultant is required to incorporate the architect's schedule of professional services. The consultant's schedule for the project, once completed and approved, cannot be exceeded by any party except for reasonable cause. The schedule can be adjusted as necessary with the owner's approval. So once again, the owner is providing cost and schedule consultants. At the end of each phase, the architect is coordinating the design with the cost consultant and making sure that their design is coming in within the estimates. The architect indemnifies the owner from the architect's negligent acts or omissions. And once again, that duty to defend and duty to provide cost of defense is separated here. So that's a distinction that is made in the new documents. Moving on to another document that is not quite out yet. We're still working on some guidance language for B503. So the current document is 2007, but we will be releasing that yet this calendar year. This is the guide for amendments to AIA owner-architect agreements. This is a free guidance document on the website. Provides model language for various aspects that you might want to amend the standard agreements to include. Some new or revised topics include materials transparency, which was added a short time ago, dealing with the environmental product declarations and health product declarations that are being used as part of LEED and other rating systems. Owner-directed changes is covered. There's model language that you can include in your agreement for that. Owner-provided cost control. If you'd like to take the cost control language out of B103 and put it in B101, this model language is provided for you. Sometimes owners will modify the standard of care, so there's some guidance on how to make sure that that does not increase your risk. And then we address cyber insurance as well, among many other things in B503. Moving on to the consultant agreement, C401, we decided it was not necessary to restate everything that's in the B documents in the C documents. So we have a flow down agreement or flow down clause that allows the architect to treat the consultant as the owner is expected to treat the architect and vice versa. A couple things that do not flow down. The standard of care in the B101, I'm sorry, it does flow down, but no matter what you put in C401, the standard of care from the B101 or B103 governs the work of the consultant. So the consultant needs to comply with the same standard of care as the architect. The architect isn't in charge of the project and drives the bus. It has a place for the consultant to stipulate how many site visits they are expected to provide during the construction of the project. If the architect authorizes the consultant to perform additional site visits, the consultant needs to be compensated for the additional services as additional services, I'm sorry. Within 7 days after receipt of a written request from the consultant, the architect needs to request information from the owner as necessary and relevant for the consultant to evaluate, give notice, or enforce lien rights. And then within 7 days of receiving that information from the owner, the architect needs to furnish the information to the consultant. And continuing with C401, these items all track changes that were made in B101. At 1.10, the use of BIM requires an agreed protocol using E203 or another protocol document. As in B101, if someone downstream uses the BIM without a written protocol, it is at their own risk. At 2.8, insurance is also much more specific in the consultant agreement, tracking the new B101 language. In Article 8, claims and disputes is expanded explicitly to follow B101, including mediation, arbitration, consolidation, and joinder. You may now join your consultant in an arbitration. And in Article 9, there is now a flow-down termination procedure as well as a termination and licensing fee arrangement. This is now explicit in C401. So if an architect terminates their consultant for convenience, they may owe them a termination fee, so negotiate that contract wisely. And with that, I think it's going back to Mike.
Thank you, Lane. So I'm going to talk about our the new Sustainable Project Exhibit for the 2017 document, which is the E204. But first, I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson on how we've kind of gotten to this point. In the 2007 documents, the idea of sustainable projects and services related to sustainability was certainly relevant, and it didn't go unaddressed in our 2007 documents. We had included some language about environmentally responsible design, which I think Lane had mentioned earlier on in his portion of the presentation. Essentially, that requirement was that at the end of, I think, the architect's preliminary evaluation, the architect was supposed to present the owner with some possible alternatives, environmentally responsible design alternatives. And then the owner and architect would reach an understanding on the program. And then the architect would move forward. And they still had to take into account certain basic things like building orientation and building materials in performing their services, but that was really it in terms of the discussion of what was called environmentally responsible design services at the time. Since then, obviously, sustainability has only continued to develop and grow, and over that time, the documents program obviously recognized those developments, and so shortly after the 2007 documents were released, we began working on a sustainability guide, and that was essentially a guide to users of our documents on the issues related to sustainability-related services, and that guide indicated how our standard form agreements could be amended or altered to address those concerns. Essentially, it provided model language after discussing a number of issues. And it was not just changes to the owner-architect agreement, it was changes to the owner-architect agreements, the owner-contractor agreements, and the general conditions. Based on that guide, we decided that we would start publishing SP, Sustainable Project versions of all of our documents. So we began with the design bid build documents, the A201 family. So we developed SP versions, and essentially what those SP versions did was take the advice that was provided in the guide and execute it and put it into a contract, a standard form agreement that people could use, rather than requiring them to take the guide and then edit our standard forms to accomplish it. We did it for them, and that essentially was the SP versions of our A201 family. And then we did the same thing with our CM family and the other families of documents. So essentially we had two versions of everything. In 2017, we decided to take a different approach. Rather than having two versions of the A201 family, a basic one and then an SP version, we decided that we would instead develop this SP exhibit. So we would have one form of our agreements, and if there was a significant sustainable objective on the project, then the parties, all of them, would add the E204 Sustainable Project Exhibit to their agreement to address the issues that arise on a sustainable project. So essentially what happened is that the terms that were originally in the guide that ended up in the SP versions of the document were now taken out of those documents and placed into an exhibit, sort of a overarching exhibit that would govern the project for sustainability-related issues. So the Sustainable Project exhibit itself begins with a number of definitions. If you are, depending on how familiar you are with all of our documents, you'll understand that A201 has a set of defined terms that essentially all of the other documents rely on. But because sustainability has its own sets of terms that need to be defined, the Sustainable Projects exhibit has its own definition section. If you looked back at the A201 SP version, you would find that these definitions appeared in that document because we tried to have all of the definitions in one place. But because we've moved away from that approach and are now having this exhibit approach, there's a few definitions that have to be addressed in the exhibit itself. So we have sustainability objective, sustainability measure, sustainability plan, sustainability certification, sustainability documentation, and then certifying authority. In terms of the architect scope, so what the exhibit does is identifies the scope of work that will be, or services that will be required of the architect, the contractor, and the owner as well. They're not left out of all this. If they want to pursue a sustainable objective, it's very likely that they will have some obligations that they need to undertake and achieve for the parties, for all of them to work towards achieving that sustainable objective. So what happens in our documents now, in the B101, in the initial information, there's a section where if there is a sustainable objective, such as LEED certification, a particular LEED certification, or perhaps a certainly energy performance level, or some other sustainability-related objective on the project, it'll be identified in initial information of B101, which essentially triggers the need for E204, the exhibit. So now you have E204 and you have a definition of the architect's scope. So what is the architect required to do if there's a sustainable objective on the project? The first requirement is the conducting of a sustainability workshop. The sustainability workshop is an obligation on the architect to meet with whatever relevant parties there are on the project. Now, it's a design bid build project, so the contractor's not on board yet. So this is going to be the architect and its consultants, and the owner. And if the owner has any consultants that it's retaining independently, those consultants as well. They will discuss the sustainability objective. They will discuss what steps need to be taken to achieve that sustainable objective. Those steps essentially get defined as the sustainable measures that will get achieved or worked towards throughout the project in order to cumulatively meet the sustainable objective. All of those sustainability measures will get will be set forth in a sustainability plan that the architect will develop based on the sustainability workshop. The workshop will occur no later than the end of schematic design. And as I said, during that meeting, they will review and discuss whatever sustainability certifications there may be, and examine the necessary sustainable measures and examine strategies essentially for implementing those sustainable measures and achieving to achieve the sustainable objective. But as part of that discussion, there's also going to be a consideration of how all of that's going to impact the owner's program, and the owner's budget for the cost of the work. So once you've had that robust discussion about the sustainable objective and all of these elements that relate to it, the architect will then move forward developing the sustainability plan based on the agreed upon sustainable objective and the agreed upon sustainable measures. So then moving forward, once you've identified the objective more fully and you've identified all of these sustainability measures, the architect will then go through the process of performing its SD, DD, and construction documents related services, developing all those documents, and incorporating whatever sustainability measures are identified in the sustainability plan. And then during the construction phase, the architect's services are going to include attention to how the sustainability measures are being constructed and achieved by the contractor. And if it's necessary, review of proposed changes in the work that potentially impact sustainability measures and the objective. And then if there is a certifying authority involved, if you are achieving something like LEED certification, the architect has an obligation under the standard language to register the project with the certifying authority. And then there's language in the document discussing the reality of the architect serving that role. The contractor has a scope as well in there. Now they're not on the project. They're not present at the sustainability workshop. That is just a reality of design bid build. If you looked at our design build documents, which were developed in 2014, they also use a sustainability exhibit that can be added on to the base agreement. And that sustainability workshop obviously includes the contractor because typically they're already involved on a design build project. But in the E204, for the design bid build world, the contractor is not present during the development of the sustainability plan. Nevertheless, the sustainability plan will have obligations on the contractor. And the sustainability plan will become part of the eventual contract documents. So just like the contractor is required to perform all the obligations in the design portion of the contract documents and the underlying contract, they're also required to perform anything that's required of it in the sustainable plan, because it becomes, again, part of the contract document. Now, during the bidding process, there may be some, or the negotiation process for the contractor's contract, there may be some adjustments to the sustainability plan based on requests by the contractor, but nevertheless, it's going to end up being part of the sustainability plan. And the E204 also becomes a part of the owner-contractor agreement. The owner also has scope and expectations in the E204. They're not as explicit because they're not as set in stone necessarily, but there is a section addressing what the owner's responsibilities are going to be on a sustainability project. That's our quick overview of the sustainable project exhibit. It probably could serve almost as its own program, but we're trying to cover all the bases here in this presentation. So with that, we'll move on to covering the contract documents insurance exhibit, as well as some other highlights that relate to the A201, because it's important for architects to understand the changes in that document and how they relate to their role on the project. So I believe Andy will be taking over for this portion.
Thanks, Mike. And this is the last segment of our program, so we're nearing the end here until we open it up for Q&A. With the 2017 release of the AIA documents comes the removal of the specifics and detail of the construction insurance requirements from the construction agreements themselves into a separate exhibit document. And again, these are the contractor insurance requirements only, contractor and owner during the construction phase. The insurance required of the architect remains in the owner-architect agreements, as Lane explained earlier. So why did we create an exhibit? Well, there were a number of challenges with the way it was previously arranged in the construction agreements. It really has to do with the complexity of insurance products and the nuances of individual projects. It's no longer a simple issue about general liability and builder's risk. There are many more options out there for an owner and a contractor to provide appropriate insurance coverage for a project. And previously there was not sufficient flexibility in our documents to capture this range of coverages that a particular project might require. So owners need a tool to discuss with their insurance advisor and counsel what is appropriate for their project. It's nowhere near as standardized as you might expect. The insurance industry changes continually, and with our schedule of updating our agreements on a 10-year schedule, we run the risk of reduced utility of our documents over time. We first explored this issue in the 2014 design build agreements, which did use an exhibit to record the required insurance. A little bit easier because we knew exactly which delivery method we were dealing with in a consolidated set of documents. But we felt the need to create this separate insurance exhibit for the A201 family. So what we did is we created a form rather than an agreement itself. A form can be updated on a more frequent basis than 10 years to reflect the changes in the insurance industry. It can be more easily sent to an owner and its insurance counsel or insurance broker. It covers the most commonly encountered bases. It avoids most commonly encountered exclusions. And by doing so, we feel we would facilitate appropriate insurance coverage for the project and reflecting the best arrangement of insurance responsibility. What's best for the owner to buy and what's best for the contractor to provide. So what's in the insurance exhibit? It's really the substance and specifics of most, but not all, of the A201 insurance provisions. We still have Article 11 in A201, which requires provides the obligation of the contractor and the owner to provide insurance, but this really provides much greater detail and exactness to it. You know, owner's coverage such as general liability, property, and others, contractor coverages such as commercial general liability, auto employer's liability, professional liability for delegated design required by the contract documents, workers' comp, and other related insurances. There are instances such as property insurance, which we commonly refer to as builder's risk, for example, that can be provided by either the owner or the contractor, and the exhibit provides the vehicle to make it clear who is obligated to do so. It's also worth mentioning the evolution, particularly of commercial general liability policies, has resulted in the proliferation of endorsements for additional insureds. This new exhibit facilitates that everyone that is supposed to be insured by the required coverage is in fact insured. And last but not least, our friends in the surety industry that provide performance and payment bonds, this exhibit spells out those requirements a lot more clearly. So as I mentioned, there is still language in A201 in Article 11, and it really is simply that the contractor is going to be obligated to provide these types of insurances. They are going to provide certificates of insurance. They are going to name the owner, architect, and the architect's consultants as additional insured. Obviously a very, very important point for architects and our consultants to be additional insureds on the contractor's insurance. It's also going to state the general categories of owner's insurance relative to property, boiler, machinery, and loss of use. Article 11 includes a mutual waiver of subrogation, and again, it identifies conceptually if performance and payment bonds are required, and if so, that they will be fully detailed in the exhibit. So, question is, what are we supposed to do with this thing? Well, it's really important that you engage the owner and the owner's insurance agent and legal counsel as soon as possible as your construction documents are developing and before you finalize your specifications. This takes some time to assemble. The owner has to realize that while you will be processing submittals and insurance certificates and the like through the normal submittal process, you are not insurance experts. That really needs to fall within the realm of the owner and their insurance counsel. AIA will be providing a guideline document for this exhibit, but really try to arrange a meeting with the owner, with their insurance counsel, and if the contractor is already on board, with the contractor, so that everybody gets on the same page and understands the project requirements. It really needs to get completed and attached. It's a contractual requirement. It's an exhibit to the contract, and it does need to be thoroughly and properly implemented. So again, realize where your expertise is, realize where it is not, and have the owner engage the necessary expertise. So I believe that concludes the part on the insurance exhibit. Other aspects of the A201 and owner contractor agreement include many of the things that Lane and Mike have been talking about. The BIM and SP exhibits, as we mentioned, are going to apply similarly across the family of documents, the same as they do for the owner architect agreements and architect consultant agreements. In the contractor agreements, we've also expanded the definitions of scheduled dates, those incremental and interim dates, as well as fixing the date of commencement of construction and substantial completion of the work. We've clarified and expanded language relative to very important financial issues for the contractor and owner, such as alternates and liquidated damages. The same owner, contractor, architect communication protocols that Lane explained as far as what's appropriate for an owner and a contractor to be talking about directly without engaging the architect, and what is required for the architect to be a part of or to be immediately advised of. We've also, similar to trying to clarify termination fee obligations in the design agreements, we've also done that in the owner-contractor agreement and contractor-subcontractor agreement. So again, as architects' obligations to a consultant flow through, similarly a contractor to a subcontractor, so termination conditions and any termination fees that apply need to be carefully considered by the contractors and subcontractors. We also try to be more definitive in establishing when, where, and how retainage is going to be reduced, if at all. Again, this is something that without definition can be a confusing issue as far as the reduction of retention as a project exceeds a 50% completion portion. So again, these are just some highlights. We have a separate webinar strictly on the A201 and owner-contractor agreements. And I will use that as a transition then to Hafti, who is going to summarize some of our resources and do a wrap-up of the program.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you to all of our presenters for the time and effort they put into our presentation today. We certainly appreciate it. As Andy said, I'm going to wrap up before we get into our Q&A session and talk a little bit about the resources that are available for you. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, you will be receiving the recording and the PowerPoint from today's presentation. The PowerPoint is also as a handout in your GoToWebinar window on the right-hand side. But the first resource here is the AIA Contract Documents Learn page. Every time we have a webinar that is recorded, we will post the recording on the Learn page. So at any time, I encourage you to go to the Learn page to see the different training available and resources available for you. There's a lot of different types of learning that's available here. Majority of it is for free, some for a nominal fee as well as in-person training that we'll be adding to the schedule. So please monitor the Learn page regularly if you'd like to learn more about our AIA contract documents content. We also have a contract document series on AIAU. Those webinars are linked here as well. They're available for purchase for $25 for AIA members and $40 for non-members. So I do encourage you also to take a look at those offerings as well. After today's webinar, if you encounter any questions at all about AIA contract documents content, please contact our docinfo service. My colleague Ben Siegel is there to assist you. While we don't offer any legal advice, he's happy to answer any questions you have about our content or what a provision means or how to complete a form. So please contact him. If there's anything he can't answer, he will forward it to our staff of attorneys on our team. You can also reach him at 202-626-7526 or docinfo@aia.org. As many of you might know, we have begun the transition to ACD5 online platform. We'll be sunsetting our desktop software for AIA contract documents December 31st of this year. So there is a plethora of training and free online demonstrations available for you. You can register by choosing courses on the Learn page. But if you have any questions about ACD5 or the transition, please contact our technical support at docstechsupport@aia.org or 1-800-942-7732. Now I'm going to moderate questions for our panel. I've seen a few questions come into the chat, but if you don't mind, go ahead and take a moment to enter any questions that you have in your right-hand GoToWebinar folder or GoToWebinar window on the right-hand side. So I see some questions that I'm going to go ahead and answer myself before handing over some content-related questions to our panel. Here's a question: is there a way to read one of these documents without purchasing it? Absolutely. Now on the AIA contract documents website, you can actually search by the document you're looking for and view a sample of that document before you purchase. So you can actually view all of the samples on our website. When we send you an email with the recording and PowerPoint, we're also going to include one page, a website link for you that you can go and actually see all of the samples that are associated with the 2017 revised documents. So you'll have all of those on one page. But at any time, you can search any document in our library and view a sample without purchasing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and now begin reading questions that have come in for our presenters, and I invite our presenters to answer. The first question is, would B109 be used on dorms development for a university?
All right, I was on mute. Let's see. Typically, those are going to be, well, if it's a public university, they typically will have their own agreement. Lane can probably speak to that. I see no reason why the document could not be used for a dorm, although it might require some modifications for consistency with the university's overall design obligations. It's probably written broadly enough that it could be used for that type of a project.
Yeah, I would agree, Mike. I think it's possible to use it for that. A lot of times, residential projects are, they do have mixed use. They have dining halls and kitchens and maybe retail incorporated into their design. So this might be a useful agreement.
I think it would require some modification. It was not something that it was necessarily designed for use for. It was really more of a mixed-use type project. But that does not mean it couldn't be used for it. A lot of the stuff will still be applicable in a dorm type situation.
Okay.
And if it's a state university, then obviously all the state garbage would come into play.
Exactly.
Here's another question that's come in. Are there any plans for a shorter form design build agreement for smaller commercial projects? Something along the lines of A145?
No, not currently.
Okay. I think I have a comment here that I'll read. It's quite a long comment, but in B105 2017 for small residential projects, the contractors don't always use the associated AIA contract, A105. And I don't often provide administration of the owner-contractor contract. Typically, I rarely have responsibilities besides clarifications and revisions for the reviewing authority. Is there a recommended way to handle indicating that in the B105 2017? Amending it. With the change, it refers you to the A105 2017 for the construction phase rule definitions, but that may not apply. Thank you.
Well, all of our documents are editable to customize the scope of services. You know, the B105 is our shortest form of agreement. It's pretty light in terms of its scope. In terms of modifying, design phase services or being more clear as to what you will or will not do in the construction administration phase, it's easily adaptable. For limited scope projects, B105 is a very good choice. I think one thing that's important for the commenter to consider is that when a non-standard construction agreement is being used, that it needs to be, thoroughly reviewed by the owner and maybe an attorney that they have to make sure that the contractor's duties and responsibilities are fully explained. It's not necessarily a duty that an architect should have to play for an owner. But then again, the other component is you don't want to have requirements in a construction agreement of the architect that are not reflected in the owner-architect agreement. So work with the B105 if you like a short form to clarify your scope of services and make sure that that scope is accurately reflected in the construction agreement.
I'll add two quick responses. All of our agreements include the architect providing construction administration related services. It's our belief that the project benefits from the architect being involved in the construction administration of the project, which is why we have it in all of our standard agreements. And I believe probably most insurance companies would prefer the architect to be involved in construction administration in the sense that they're the ones who develop the plans. They understand the design more than anyone else, and are the best party to interpret issues that are coming up on the project as they relate to the design of the document or of the project. But the reality is quite often, obviously, that the architect is not going to be involved on smaller projects during CA-related services. The B105 can easily be edited to take those out. However, you probably would be best served to contact either your local insurance counsel or your own attorney to add some language to the document to accommodate for the fact that you are not going to be on site and you'll have no role in the construction administration because you may want to address some issues that as far as limiting your liability because you're no longer on the project to troubleshoot and if things go south because you're no longer on the project, you'd want some protection from that.
In response to a question, this webinar is eligible for 1.5 HSW AIA learning units. When you registered, you entered your AIA member number. I will collect those numbers and report your credit directly to the AIA within 2 weeks, and it will then appear on your online transcript. And with that, there's another question here. So with regards to design-build agreements being incorporated more often in today's construction climate, how does the design-build family briefly compare to the DBIA agreement?
Well, that's
another seminar.
I don't think we can answer that on this. It's been a little bit since I've read the DBIA documents. Our documents, I can describe our documents probably a little bit, but we don't assume that the design builder is a contractor, even though that is typically the case. The architect could serve the role as a design builder, but you're probably more focused on what's the key aspects of the design builder architect agreement. That's the most traditional role for an architect. Our document takes a menu approach to the architect services. We sort of recognize that quite often there's really just not a standard set of services that an architect provides as a consultant to a design builder. It really depends on what the design builder wants the architect to do, what capabilities the design builder has in-house. Similar to the last question, sometimes the design, or one of the previous questions, the design builder does not want the architect to perform CA-related services. They don't find it necessary. And so for that reason, the document itself takes a menu approach. Although the one aspect I would say, the menu approach to services, where essentially you have to check the box about what exactly the architect's going to do. Our documents do contemplate that there may be a bridging architect, designer involved that the owner had hired, and so we have provisions contemplating that. And we also explicitly state that the architect is just subject to its standard professional standard of care. You have to be careful in a number of design build agreements that a owner and design builder relationship will assume a higher responsibility than the professional standard of care between the owner and the design builder, and they will flow that down to the design team, which exceeds their insurance. They won't be insured for anything beyond professional standard of care. So we are mindful and explicit in our documents that regardless of what the owner design builder relationship says in terms of warranties or guarantees regarding anything, the architect is still just subject to the professional standard of care. I'm not saying that the DBIA documents do that because I just haven't read them in a little while, so I don't want there to be a misunderstanding there, but that is something that we were careful about and explicit in our documents.
Okay, great. I do want to respond to questions regarding a certificate of attendance. When I emailed the recording along with the PowerPoint from today's presentation, please feel free to reply back to me requesting a certificate, and I will process that and get that out to you. So with that, we're at the 3:30 time. So I would like to now thank all of our attendees for joining us today. We hope you found this webinar helpful. Please let us know if you have any follow-up questions once you receive our follow-up email. And thank you to Mike, Lane, and Andy for that thoughtful presentation. With that, we wish you a great afternoon.